All right. Welcome everyone to our event today. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here and you should be able to see me. Hello everyone and welcome to another amazing event with the Center for Global Education. My name is Sarah and I am the program director here at the Center for Global Education, and I'm joining you today on Treaty 6 territory in Canada, and that is a traditional meeting place and gathering grounds of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Nakota Sioux, Blackfoot, Métis, and we acknowledge all the peoples and individuals who came through our lands before we were here. And so land acknowledgements in Canada are a part of our reconciliation process. And we acknowledge who lived on our lands before colonizers or settlers came in. And it's a part of understanding and moving through and reconciling those feelings and the pain and the destruction that was caused to our land before that happened. As we go through our conversation today, that doesn't really maybe apply to Kenya and Nairobi. They're in a different process, as is Australia, as is Bangladesh. And we are having these wonderful treaty conversations. And our friend from Bangladesh who is here today joined us for that. It was such an amazing look at that. But anyways, I wanted to give our territorial acknowledgement before we started and welcomed our speakers and our classes. I see Mrs. McIver's class from Calgary has joined us and we're so excited to have them here. And I know they haven't prepared an introduction, but I wanted to acknowledge that they're here and some are online on the live stream. So hello to everyone on the live stream that's joining us there. And welcome to our friends who are here in the room. We have students from Bangladesh, we have students from Kenya, we have students from Canada, and I think it's going to be an amazing conversation with our speakers from the ACGC, Alberta Council for Global Cooperation, and our very amazing, aspiring academic educational leader, Mary Gabriel from Kenya. I'm so excited to hear how these two play together, especially as, you know, in these times of isolation and COVID, and how are we thinking globally while we are maybe stuck very locally. And so I'm just so excited to welcome you all here today. Now our first speaker, quick interrupt, but before I do that, what I was saying before is that if you have questions, we all have questions for our lovely speakers, and our lovely speakers would like to, they know this stuff. So they want to make sure you get out of today what you want to get out of today, the knowledge you need. So if there's a question or there's a comment or there's a word you don't understand, let's get those sorted. And so if you have a question, write it here if you're in the Zoom meeting in the chat. And if you're online joining us from the live stream, put it in the live stream chat. I'm on there as well. I'll bring it back into this room. No problem. We're happy to negotiate those two internet spaces. All right, I'm gonna throw over to and welcome our first speaker, Brett. Oh, let's see if I can spotlight you, Brett. There you go. Hello. How are you this morning, Brett? Welcome.
Doing very well. Excited to be here.
Wonderful.
Sorry, just quick notifications, technology.
Always, right? Oh, well, you're joining from Edmonton as well.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for the territory recognition. It's always important to think about the spaces we're in, think about how we can be caretakers.
Wonderful. Now I'm going to do a quick, I wonder if Mary's still here. We can just do a quick wave to Mary. Hello, Mary. We're going to be throwing over to you soon, but I want to welcome you and your students, and we can't wait to hear. We have this wonderful dynamic, I think, today, because Brett, you're very much you work in the nonprofit agency, and this is what you do as an organization, is talk about global citizenship and the SDGs. And then Mary, you're a practitioner, and in this time of COVID, I'm just so excited for this dynamic of sort of academic and in practice, and I think it's going to be a wonder sort of play today. So Brett, I'm going to throw over to you to start, but Mary, thank you for joining us, and we're so excited to get to you soon.
Great. All righty, everybody. I'm just going to quickly share my screen on this slide deck. Oh. Sarah, can you share your screen?
I totally can. Oh, let me do this. This one?
Perfecto.
There we go. Look at you.
Oh, fantastic.
There
all right, everybody. So thank you for joining today. I want to double down on Sarah's invitation for questions. Please throw them in the Zoom chat. I'm going to be calling on folks partway through so we can have a bit of a discussion about the global goals, and we'll be able to go from there. So my name is Brett. I'm here from the Alberta Council for Global Cooperation. We work supporting international development actors based out of Alberta, and we focus our work around the global goals, the Sustainable Development Goals. Here you can see an overview of the 17 goals. We'll dig into them a little bit more so you'll know exactly what's there. But these goals are a structure to help everyone all around the world think about a better future. So these goals were outlined in 2015 by the United Nations, and we are working towards achieving them by 2030. It's a lofty goal, as you'll see as we start digging into them, but it's an important one, and it's an exciting one for us to be working on together. Next slide, please.
You bet. So Brett, just so you know, you're a little quiet on the live stream.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there you go. You're
perfect.
Nice.
Great. All righty. So thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals. So what is sustainable development, the SD of the SDGs? Sustainable development looks at achieving the needs of today without compromising the needs of the future. So how do we achieve our social sustainability, our environmental sustainability, our economic sustainability without really compromising the ability of future generations to achieve it? It's part of that caretaking process, something that we mentioned with the land acknowledgement, thinking about how do we maintain ourselves today without compromising the future. And when you look at sustainable development, there are really three elements that interplay with each other. You can see them here. It's the environmental, the social, and the economic perspectives. So first up, I want to talk about the environment. We need to figure out ways that we can work harmoniously with the environment, how we can integrate it into our urban spaces, how we can make sure that there's naturally preserved land and territory, and thinking about how we can maintain a balance with nature, ensure that ecosystems are growing and lush. We need to be able to address the ongoing climate change situation and really being able to support the natural stakeholders that we might see around us. The second element that I want to talk about is social sustainability. So this one is, I think, a little bit more confusing than the other ones, but it really looks at addressing human needs, both basic and a little bit higher needs. So first off, you can talk about hunger, access to water and shelter, things that are really essential to life and ongoing life. And then you can dig in a little bit deeper and start moving up the pyramid of needs, thinking about increased quality of education, thinking about reducing inequalities that might exist based on people's gender, based on their ethnicity, based on their religious beliefs, and starting to work to address those needs, making sure that there's more equitable sustainability in our societies in that way. So that's the social aspect of sustainable development. And the third piece is that economic. How can we continue to grow? How can we continue to foster innovative technological advances? How can we see people having access to good work and growth? And how can we really see that economic growth and development? So within the Sustainable Development Goals, there are specific goals that look at these three aspects of the SDGs, and you can see how they start to interplay. Something I'll talk about a little later on is how there's a ton of interconnections between the goals. Some of them are really positive for each other. They make it easy to achieve other goals, and some can make it a little bit more challenging to achieve other goals. So you see that different interplay throughout. Next slide, and I think that there's a few clicks you'll have to go through, Sarah. And I'll pull up my notes here. Perfect. So now that we've talked about sustainable development, let's talk about the goals. What are the goals? So they really are global. 192 nations have accepted the challenge of achieving these goals. And what that means is we're responsible for achieving the goals here in Canada, we're responsible for achieving the goals in Kenya, we're responsible in Bangladesh, in Russia, in Brazil, all around the world. Every country is responsible for working towards these different goals. The second aspect of the goals is they're inclusive. A really important piece of the goals is that no one is left behind. This means that there aren't any groups within society who aren't treated right. They aren't included in those goals. So if there's a specific group of people who might be disenfranchised, we need to identify ways for them to be included in these goals. How can they start working towards addressing poverty in their communities? It looks at the individual level as well. If there's one person within a society who isn't being treated well, that's someone who's left behind, and we won't have achieved the goals based on that. It can also be at a nation to nation scale. When we're talking about developing and developed nations, thinking about that relationship is a really important aspect when we're talking about international development, to make sure that we're investing in communities and countries that really need investment in them. Speaking from the Canadian landscape, there's a lot of work that still needs to go on within our country, but also thinking about that international scale and how Canada can be a leader in supporting other countries as they continue to grow, as they continue to become more and more developed, is really, really important for the work that we do at ACGC. And the third aspect of the goals, as I mentioned, is that they're interconnected. Haha, you jumped the gun. And that interconnection, like I said earlier, you see how some goals start contributing to each other. When we talk about addressing hunger, that's a great way to address poverty. When we talk about some of that tension that might exist, if we pick on Alberta for a second, SDG 7 is all about clean energy, and SDG 8 is all about economic growth. Making that transition towards a less carbon intensive uh, energy system is going to impact Alberta's economy in a big way. So we need to figure out the best way moving forward to address those goals. Next slide, please. So where do the global goals come in the classroom? When we're talking about education, first and foremost, goal number 4 is all about quality education. It looks at a bunch of different aspects of education, how people are accessing it, and different barriers that might exist. Sarah, can you just click 4 times? There's 4 more icons that will come up. So this goal looks at different aspects of education and what it means to have quality education. So the first part in the top left corner there is all about economic barriers to education. If it's not feasible for somebody to be attending primary education because of their family economics, that means that that person is going to start falling behind. They're going to be left behind. We need to figure out structures to make primary education not have barriers based on economics. Similarly, when you get into secondary and post-secondary education, figuring out ways to support students stepping into those spaces is really important and really, really valuable from different countries throughout. So the second aspect in the top right corner there is all about accessibility of learning spaces. Thinking about people stepping into a school, and I know right now with COVID, stepping into a school is a weird analogy, but if there are physical barriers based on someone's ability being in a learning space, that's a barrier for them getting that quality education. If someone with a cognitive disorder doesn't have their needs met in a specialized way, they're not going to really be able to get that quality of education that they would need to start breaking down other stigma that might exist for them. When we talk about right now with COVID around accessibility, we're all connecting right now through computers, through technology. If somebody didn't have access to the internet, if they didn't have access to a reliable computer, if it's a single computer family, they're not going to have the same access to quality education right now as you might see in spaces like this where we all have our own computers. So that's an important aspect to be thinking about a current event and how it impacts quality of education. And the third piece of quality education is the actual content that's being presented. Education is a great way to break down stigma that might exist. Understanding different groups of people, different perspectives, and looking at ideologies that might be in conflict with each other is a great way for people to continue to excel and to get a more globalized education and globalized perspectives. So that's an important aspect, is thinking about the actual education that's coming in and whether or not it might reinforce some negative stereotypes that exist within society. And the fourth piece is all about knowing the SDGs. Education that includes the SDGs is really important for equipping citizens for addressing them. Because these goals are so complex, they're so big, they're so cross-cutting, we need everyone to work towards them, and we need everyone to know about them to work towards them. This is a bit of an old statistic, but only 12% of Canadians knew about the SDGs 2 years ago. So hopefully that percentage is a little bit higher. But if only 12% of our population knows about them, they're not going to be able to work. The other 88% aren't going to be able to contribute to them in as meaningful a way as that 12%. So spread the word, tell your friends, tell your family, and hopefully more and more people will know about the SDGs. So that's quality education in a nutshell, the SDG. Next slide, please. Alrighty. So this is where you come in. We want to think about the different SDGs. I want you to think a little bit about how quality education contributes to other SDGs. Where's that partnership? So I want to think first about the economic side of the goals. So SDG number 1, no poverty, the elimination of poverty everywhere. And SDG number 8, decent work and economic growth. When we see quality education, how might that influence these goals? So I'll encourage anybody to jump in, share their thoughts. How does quality education contribute to no poverty and decent work and economic growth?
It can provide more opportunities for higher paying jobs.
Absolutely. That's a really important first step in thinking about how education contributes to that economic growth. Are there other ways that education might influence poverty or good work and economic growth?
Education itself provides jobs for people and
Yeah,
therefore the economic growth.
absolutely. Teachers everywhere, folks who work in this area, that is a really important piece of it. So yeah, great thought. Any other thoughts?
Nissa has
Well,
her-
if you have good education, then you're going to make the right choices.
Absolutely. That's a really, really key point. So when you think about aspects of good health and well-being, when you think about aspects of career progression, when you get education and you're able to look at these different perspectives, it's really, really valuable for people moving forward in their lives. So that's a really great thought. Opportunities for jobs and career development, opportunities for teachers to do work, and increasing citizens' abilities to make decisions, those would all influence economic aspects. Okay, we're going to move on to the next part of sustainable development, social development. And I want to focus in specifically on inequalities that exist. So there are 2 goals that name inequalities. So the first one is goal number 5, gender equality. And the second one is number 10, reduced inequalities. These goals, they look at what are different barriers that might exist for people just based on their identities. So what are some thoughts? How does quality education start to break down those inequalities that might exist?
I see Rose has her hand up, but it might be for something else.
Rose, what's your hand up for? What do you got for us?
No, I wanted to touch on the previous point you were talking about, but it's fine. It's fine.
What did you have?
By having more education, that means people acquire skills, and if they acquire skills, that means they're able to have more job opportunities to break down the barrier of poverty. Yeah, that was
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you see that ability to have more jobs and thinking about that way. And when we start thinking about some of those inequalities that exist, if we look at the economic side of things, and that tying into that inequality, providing opportunities for women and girls to get higher education levels, that would start to break down some of those barriers that might exist around gender equality. So in that way, that starts to tie into that inequality. Are there any other thoughts on that social side of inequalities that might exist?
If I can spin it to my students, so think about how would gender inequality have an impact on education, or how could it reinforce one another? I think you guys can.
Pressure's on. She's thrown down the gauntlet. Will any of the students pick it up?
Could it be that gender inequality skews the platform for higher paying jobs in one direction, therefore giving less opportunities to others to take up the mantle?
Yeah, definitely. That's one aspect of it. Thinking about the gender pay gap that exists, and thinking about opportunities for higher levels of work based on gender inequality, you can see how that starts to reinforce some of those inequalities within society. And improved education, as I said, if we're able to better invest in education for women and girls, that would start to break down some of that inequality that might exist there. So that's a great thought. Other thoughts? Sarah, any thoughts?
It looks like I was looking on the live stream, but there are quite a bunch over there as well. Rose has her hand again. Rose, did you have a thought?
Yeah, my thought was by having education, proper quality education, we basically break down that barrier of discrimination that men are supposed to do certain jobs which women can't do, which provides more job opportunities again for both genders. I think that's my opinion. It's my thought.
Absolutely. So education is a really, really great step to helping groups understand each other. If we think kind of beyond that gendered aspect and we think about other identities that we might have, to pick on Canada for a little bit, we've had a historical problem with our relationship between colonizing Canadians and the Indigenous folks of Turtle Island. And there's been great steps forward over the last decade or so in presenting better perspectives around Indigenous folks of Turtle Island. And that land recognition that we did at the beginning is a step towards reconciliation. So education is a gateway for creating better nation-to-nation relationships. And just to see that Canadian perspective on it, it helps to break down stereotypes that might exist around Indigenous folks, and helps to provide them with better opportunities moving forward. So that's a gateway for education to start breaking down some of those different barriers, thinking about it through the gendered lens, the gender pay gap, thinking about access to education is really important, really, really valuable.
Anissa in Bangladesh also has a comment. Anissa, would you like to jump in? Well,
Sorry, I'm actually having some technical difficulties.
no worries.
But I think there are certain people and communities that have certain misconceptions that are driven into their minds since their birth. And when you give them education, they come out of this through the awareness, and they have this idea and this sort of revelation to themselves that what I've been doing for this long, the discrimination that I've been creating and how I've been behaving with certain groups of people, that's wrong. And that is a huge impact that education brings to these certain people, and therefore reduces inequality.
That is so good, so on point, very, very well said.
Thank you.
If you're brought up in a specific way to think a certain way about specific groups of people, you're going to act towards those people in a specific way. And if education is able to present different perspectives and is able to help you to empathize with other groups, it's going to help you to start breaking down some of that discrimination that you might have unknowingly been spreading. So really, really great point. And it helps to showcase the importance of education. So very well said. Great points, everyone. Thinking about education as an opportunity for creating more social development, socially progressive societies. We're going to think about that last aspect of sustainable development now, the environmental side of things. Climate action, life below water, life on land. How does education help us to contribute to these three goals?
Come on, class, we're waiting for you. How does
oh.
education help with climate change?
In the same way that it might help with gender inequality, in that through misconceptions, education will help people understand that the world also needs our help just as much as other countries do.
Absolutely. Speaking from the Albertan perspective, having conversations around climate change could be pretty difficult, but having people equipped with more knowledge around the issue helps them to see the importance of taking action on it. So that's a really great point about breaking down some of those perspectives. Maybe one more thought on environmental sustainability, and then we'll rocket through the last few slides I have.
I think when you're raising more and more awareness about these climate issues, young activists as well as teenage activists and all of these sorts of people that understand the severity of the problem show up. And you kind of accelerate how fast the problem is being heard about and how fast people are hearing about it, which at the end of the day results in the problem being solved earlier.
Absolutely. I think you touch on a really good point about education in that, is that education isn't just going to a school and doing one lesson and learning from a lesson. Education can also just be talking to your peers. It can be hearing from other people in society, hearing what their perspectives are, what they think is important, and what the science is that's behind it. So that's a great opportunity for less formalized education and more peer-to-peer education, and starting to see how we can break down some of those issues that are contributing to climate change. So great work, everybody. Great thoughts on different aspects of sustainability, how education contributes to all the goals, and you've been able to see, hopefully, how you can contribute to those goals. Now, just jumping into this very last slide I have, what can you do to make the global goals a reality? How can we achieve these goals? Oh, I had one more slide, sorry. It was a bit of a trick question. Which goals do SDGs contribute to? It's all of them. It's at the bedrock of every single one of these goals as we work towards them. The last slide, I don't want to take up any more of Mary's time. How can you make the global goals a reality? There are 3 pieces that I have here. The first one is to ask tough questions. Consider what you're learning through the lens of these global goals. Which goals could you apply the knowledge to in order to achieve them? When you look at the 17 goals, there's a bunch of different aspects. You might be passionate about contributing to one. You can use it as a lens to say, what am I learning about today? How can I use it to contribute to these goals? I think it's really interesting to ask this question in science class, thinking about how technology can be used to achieve some of these goals, but you can think about it in social studies and math and English. How can I contribute to these goals through my education? The second piece is to spread the word. As I said, only 12% of Canadians knew about the SDGs. It's a similar stat all around the world. So if you tell your friends, tell your family about the SDGs, tell them about which SDG you're most passionate about, and talk about the work that you're doing to contribute to it, it's going to invite more people in to contribute to these goals, and it's going to make it more likely that in 2030 we have a sustainable and peaceful world together. And the third piece is to be good global citizens. Think hard about communities that you interact with and how you can support them. Think about groups of people who need support, who need help. Think about actions that need to be taken and contribute to it. This is a tall order. This is a big ask. All 3 of these are big asks. But if we're all working towards them, if we're all thinking about them, we're going to be much better equipped to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'll hand it back to Sarah, and I'll be here and throw in some thoughts as I can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brett. That was a great overview of the SDGs. And I think, it's such a great way to get everyone talking about them and thinking about them. And how does this relate to that? Because I think sometimes when we see a list of goals or anything, we think, oh, they're distinct points. But we don't really consider sometimes the overlap and how one of them might be entirely dependent on another. So thank you so much for that great introduction. Now, Mary, I know you have wonderful things to share, so we're gonna hop right over to you and invite you to share what you have to say about how this relates to your practices and what you're seeing in Kenya today.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Just allow me to share some of the work that I was able to put down today to share with you. First and foremost, welcome to the presentation. I am Mary Nadenge Gabriel from Nairobi, Kenya, a teacher by profession. And I work a lot with the young people, talking about different issues and just helping them to get more to get more important in society, to do a few actions and things that can move society towards a positive direction. So to start off, I just wanted to think out of this whole thing, and I was looking at what is happening in the world today and the way everybody is locked up and the way nothing seems to be moving, and talk about global citizenship, SDGs, and COVID-19. So what is the cost of the pandemic? That is what I'm talking about. And what are the effects of the pandemic on us achieving our goals as we set them out earlier on? I know that different countries had put away different resources to achieve SDGs by certain number of years, say 2030. But the coming in of COVID-19, how has that affected the achievement of the goal of the SDGs by different countries? That's what I wanted to talk about. So looking at the real picture, so what is the relevance of our place as citizens, as global citizens and SDGs amidst COVID-19? Amid the COVID-19 crisis. So the world today is actually locked up in a crisis, in a pandemic, and a lot of plans and policies that had already been put out towards achieving the SDGs, whatever SDGs in education, in health, in environment, most of them would look like have been shelved because everybody's frantically trying to amass resources and get together and look for plans and ways of being able to overcome the pandemic today. So I say today the world is dealing with a humongous crisis. This is novel coronavirus, which is actually wreaking havoc across the globe, destroying lives and ruining livelihood. I was looking at the primary distraction as loss of lives, the number of people that we have lost, people, brains and strategists. We have lost scientists, we have lost doctors, people who would really like set out and be blessed the way towards attaining the SDGs and the plans that had already been put up. So, and the secondary one is, of course, the economy has collapsed. We have seen the education system. Until the pandemic, I thought education was such an essential service to the world, and that I never ever saw a time in my life when I would be sitting at home and not sitting in class and interacting with students and hugging them and loving them. I am really like screwed behind the screen, and I feel like if I could just get to hug any one of them. And I'm wondering, after all this, and if we go back to school, how is it going to affect our mannerisms? How is it going to affect our characters? Are we still going to be the social kind of people that we were? Are we like, every time I feel like hugging Ross and I go like, oh my God, this is not what we are supposed to be doing, or we will just get ourselves back there again? And so those are some of the things that were going on in my mind when I'm thinking about the SDGs. And we are talking about compatibility. We are talking about collaboration as a people, and being able to come together as global citizens in attaining SDGs, and also just attaining some of the global problems that face us together. So I was looking at the massive loss of human lives, the effects on global economy, on our livelihood, on our sustainable development prospects. Last year, when we were out there for the conference in Spain, we came back with a lot of ideas. Every country was going to put action into what had happened, what we had seen. We had our students with us. They were able to talk to students from other parts of the world at COP26. And we had all these ideas that we were going to sit down and plan and be able to reach out to our neighbors in terms of the environment, in terms of health, in terms of sanitation. And look, the world just shut down. And even as educationists, and even as people who are leaders in society, we are not able to do that. We have seen massive losses of life. We have seen economy has gone down. We have seen people losing jobs. People losing jobs, parents staying at home with their children because they are not even able to pay fees. Students in my country, and I'm sure in many developed countries, are not in school, have not been in school from the beginning of the year because they are not able to afford a laptop. How would they even afford a laptop if they can't afford 3 meals in a day? How has that affected education? How are we going to compare with other developed nations where remote learning has been going on, like they just picked it up from sitting and they picked it up and are moving on? Africa is different. We have all students who go to public schools where there are no lights. They can't even have internet. They don't have laptops, and they have been at home. All they do is to sit at home. So we are looking, the IMF recently gave an estimate that our world has entered into a recession, and that the full economic impact of the crisis will be difficult to predict. We can't be able to predict that right now, especially in terms of education, especially in terms of economy, especially in terms of lives that have been lost. And so the cost of the pandemic is actually large, and it's really large. So our global weaknesses, the pandemic actually has shown beyond doubt that as global citizens, we must stand up. We must stand up and be able to deal with poverty. A number of people have lost lives in developing nations because we are poor. A family can't afford a bottle of sanitizer. You know, a family of, say, we have large families in Africa. And even if we were to go into remote learning, not every family can afford 5 laptops for their children to learn. So as global citizens, that has been a challenge. There's weak health systems. There's lack of education for now. All public schools in this country are shut, completely shut. I have a daughter who is actually supposed to be a candidate finishing high school this year. She hasn't been to school since February. She hasn't seen a teacher even on the screen, and she's expected to do her exams November, December this year. And the government is still, juggling with the idea of, do we have candidates go back to school and have fewer students on campus so that we have social distancing? But the parents are like, how safe are our children? And so there is this whole back and forth push between different entities within society. So that is something that we will need to think about as global citizens, being able to better our health systems, being able to look at alternatives to education, and being able to build systems that can be lasting and sustainable, so that at no one point should we have, we don't have students in school because we don't have electricity, we can't afford remote learning, and yet these are still countries that citizens pay taxes very regularly and very faithfully, and some of those taxes can go into that. So we need to get together to be able to deal with these global weaknesses that should anything else happen, and we are not saying that something should happen, but should anything else happen, we should be more prepared as a globe. We should be able to help each other a lot better. So these are the common global challenges that I wanted to talk about. So there's no doubt that our world faces common challenges, that we need to come for the first time, and maybe in many years, we now suddenly realize that we as a globe are united as one under one challenge, which is COVID-19. we are all in this. And if we can be able to make another part of the world feel a little easier, we are all ready to support and to help each other. All testing kits have been sent to Africa, to other developing nations. Those who have food are able to share and donate and share with others. And so that is coming together as global citizens. And the ongoing crisis has reinforced the interdependence of the world, and our global challenges can only be solved through common global solutions. We must, as global citizens, come up with common global solutions that can help us, that can help solve any of the problems that can come our way now and even in the future. Now, a global recovery can only happen through SDGs. The pandemic has not stopped the attainment of the SDGs in any other way, in any way. If anything, it has strengthened and given us a closeness that through it, we can be able to recover through SDGs. So as global citizens, we must work together, one, to save lives. This is actually the primary problem that has faced us. Restore livelihood after this whole thing is over. We all need to go back to our lives. Students need to go back to school. Parents need to go back to work. Those who have lost jobs in the event must look for something to sustain themselves through, and so bring the global economy back on track. That is very important and key. And there is also every need for us to focus on people. I think there is no better resource than a people, particularly women. We have talked about gender inequalities, especially women, especially the youth, the low-wage workers, the working class, the lowest class of social class in society. So there's every need for us to focus on this. There's every need for us to help each other. We need to work as global citizens, as provide ladders for each one of us to scale to higher levels. Now, small and medium enterprises, those who are just trying to come up, trying to make their lives. So this is one thing that the globe must be able to focus on. The informal sector, vulnerable groups who are already at risk, people who are homeless, people who do not have jobs, women and children who have been discriminated against, the minority ethnic groups, immigrants in different countries. We have seen immigrants in countries having to be sent back home or have been treated in some unfair way, and their different countries have had to recall them home. So those are vulnerable groups which in future must be looked at by everybody. Like, we must be able to reach out to each other in some way or another. Now, the global action. After all this is said and done, as a continent, we can afford to shift resources away from priority SDGs actions. We can't afford to. Even if we have to talk about getting medication, getting vaccination, training more medical staff, we can't as a globe afford to shift resources away from priority SDG actions. No, we must be able to achieve the SDGs, which will put us on a solid foundation and a firm path to dealing with global health risks and any emerging infectious diseases, e.g. the COVID-19. So that I thought was quite important. And when we talk about quality education, which Brett actually dealt with very well, I don't think I even need to talk about this. This is actually our greatest interest, and this is where we all lie. And when we're talking about quality education, it is what changes society. It is what just opens up minds and makes us understand that it is important for us to go to school so we can think better, so we can be able to lift each other. So UNESCO recently estimated that about 1.25 billion students are actually affected by the pandemic, whether physically, in terms of they lost their parents, they lost some of their relatives, or they're not just in school, or if they used to get any help or support from somewhere to be able to be in school, many people don't even have jobs. And some of them have had to cut off some of the support that is given to some of the students who are educated by them. So this poses actually a serious challenges. And schools around the world have been shut from the beginning of the year. And this is really not good for us. I understand that the whole world is shut down and all of us are losing time. But looking at what happens during this period, say 5, 7, 10 years later, what is the effect of this period to, say, education, to, say, to our health facilities and health? How are students who go through this season and lose this much time, how are they going to compare to maybe students who went through school without having to break or something like that? Those are some of the researches that some of the researchers will be looking at. So quality education. So in Africa and other developing countries, poverty and ignorance has made it close to impossible for students and teachers alike to engage in any form of learning. So we are only lucky if we are in private schools that manage to have students learning at this time. In fact, today in one of our teacher briefing, what the head of school was saying is that we are basically keeping the students busy so that they don't engage in other activities that are not expected, those that are not norm to society. We are keeping them busy so that they know, oh, we'll be logging in, we'll be having mathematics, we'll be having English, so that they do not engage. But clearly, we will have to go back and reteach most of the topics that we have done. Look at our candidates, the year 11s, the year 12s, and the year 13. Their morals are so low. They are so burnt out. They drag to come to class. Out of a class of 10, you could have like about 3 students coming in. So it's hard on everybody, even for those who have a chance to participate in remote learning. It's just like not what is norm. And many students actually go to school and love to have education because they go to school and they meet their friends. I was talking to my class the other day and I was telling them, you guys, how do you feel? You know, like you could wake up in the morning and just leave your bed onto your desk and log in and that is it. And they were like, no, miss, I would rather be in school and chat and play with my friends. So for students, it's different. We look at it as adults because we are paying for this education and we want them to get degrees and to move on and become better people. But students actually go to school to meet their peers, to be happy, to laugh and to chat. So lack of power, clean water and sanitation has also reduced chances of achieving this goal. The goal, SDG goal number 6. I will try and
all right, Mary, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we have 1 minute left.
Yeah.
And just, you're okay, such an
I'll go through this very fast.
Go to the last one. Let's end on a bang.
Okay. So as a globe, we must actually turn the crisis into opportunities so that we do not talk about this another time. Make sure that these are opportunities and they're going to be mind openers for what we need to do to be better prepared for should anything like this happen again. Ramp the spirit of solidarity so that we are all together and support each other in this. Amass resources to deal with pressing and existential challenges and enhance political will and commitment. And finally, so those are some of the things that I thought I should talk about. Thank you so much. I took so much, Sarah. I'm so sorry.
Oh my goodness, we've run out of time. It was so wonderful having you all here. I know that you must have questions. And so we will leave the live stream questions open. We can add the questions there. I will have Brett and Mary and have their contact information, and they will be, I'm sure, very, very happy to answer any questions. They've answered a few in the chat here as well. So thank you, Brett. Thank you, Mary. I know you have questions. I'm sorry we didn't get time. It's just such a great conversation, especially right now in the time of COVID, to think about how do we look at these problems through the lens of the SDGs. This can be our guiding. We have this framework, this foundation. How do we invest in it to really move forward in a new lens, with a new light, thinking of ourselves as embedded within our global world? and of our own privileges and our own responsibilities here in Canada, in Kenya. How do we band together and use this as a lens to move forward? So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone from Calgary. Thank you, everyone on the live stream. It's been wonderful having you today. Thank you, Mary and Brett, for wonderful presentations. I'm sorry we didn't have more time. I could have done another hour. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
All right.
Thank you very much.